Okay, I know this is a controversial one, but bear with me and let me explain. Welcome all to another Let Me Explain video. So today I'm going to be talking about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of Crystal Skull, perhaps the most controversial entry in the Indiana Jones franchise. With Indiana Jones 5, The Dial of Destiny almost upon us, I thought it was fitting to revisit this fourth entry and see what all the fuss was really about, and to really remember what I felt of this film myself, because it's been so long since I'd last seen it that I couldn't quite remember what I liked or disliked or what particularly everyone hated about it. So when Kingdom of the Crystal Skull released in 2008, it was undoubtedly a box office success, reaching almost $800 million worldwide. However, the response from both critics and fans was far different, where it received much backlash for a variety of reasons, which I'm going to dig into today. So the main reasons people hated this film was, one, to do with the heavy use of CGI, two, to do with the far-fetched action sequences, three, some questionable dialogue, and four, the alien storyline. And some of the scenes in this film are definitely terrible, and they're so terrible that they've actually led a lot of people to make it almost popular to hate on this film. You know, a lot of people will jokingly say there are only 3 Indiana Jones films. After recently rewatching it, my assessment is that it's not that bad, and in fact there are some good to great scenes throughout this film. And I really believe that fans have gotten carried away with using a few scenes to justify this film as being considered terrible, when really we don't really give that sort of assessment or apply that sort of criteria to most films when we judge them. We usually judge a film for the sum of all of its parts, not just 1 or 2 scenes here and there. Yes, all the scenes make up a coherent film, and this film definitely does have some scenes that are questionable and bad, but that to me does not derail the entire film. I believe that there is a solid story throughout that makes up for these bad scenes. And so today I'm going to cover the reasons as to why this film is hated so much, but then I'm also going to move on to talk about the things that I really like about this film and why I believe that it is really unfairly hated and treated. So first and foremost, I believe the main reason that people hate this film is to do with its few far-fetched and downright terrible scenes, namely being the nuke the fridge scene when Indy jumps into a fridge that gets nuked and he survives that. Second being the monkey vine swinging scene with Shia LaBeouf's character Mutt as he's swinging through vines like a monkey. And then the third scene being this raft, well, this scene with the car where it kind of jumps off a cliff and lands in a tree and then kind of just falls to the ground nicely, and then like as if it was all planned. Just these 3 really bad scenes that just are like, they take you out of the film for a moment, and yeah, they just on their own objectively bad. But each of these scenes don't really have any bearing on the plot or the story of this film. They're just individual moments or scenes that take place, a moment of action or whatever, but they don't really have anything to do with the storyline. They don't cause inconsistencies or anything like that. Yes, they are far-fetched, but they don't affect the story in any way. So I'm willing to just kind of let them pass. It's just, okay, it's a stupid scene. It takes away a bit from the film, but it doesn't take away from the story in any way. The Indiana Jones franchise is certainly not foreign to the idea of far-fetched scenes or moments. You only have to look at the second entry with the Temple of Doom and a scene where they literally use a life raft to jump out of a plane and safely glide or fall towards a water or towards a river and safely land there. I mean, that's as far-fetched as it gets in my mind. But yes, whilst that scene did have its criticisms, people weren't using it to say that the Temple of Doom is just an all-round terrible film. The second main criticism is the dialogue, and mainly for it being called campy. Well, yes, it does have campy dialogue, but I'm here to say that I also believe that the whole Indiana Jones franchise has campy dialogue. And that's not a criticism by any means. Like, I love the Indiana Jones franchise and I love the dialogue in these films because they are that way. It makes us feel like we are in a special sort of universe that with this amazing adventures, and it's something that we can't really like experience in our own lives, but in this world we get to experience them with Indy, and so we are willing to believe this extra kind of crazy and camp dialogue that we hear because it's so fun and amazing and just takes our imagination to wild places. I love that. That's what we love about them. It's not a criticism for Indiana Jones films to be campy. What I do believe happened was the first 3 Indiana Jones films came out in the 80s. This was a time of extra positive filmmaking where every story had a happy ending. You had fun action scenes, all this sort of stuff. It was a whole kind of pushback from the previous era in the 70s, which had a lot of kind of negative and downward feeling films. But fast forward to 2008 with Kingdom of Crystal Skull, you've got different audiences now that have different sensibilities and sensitivities to certain dialogue. we were no longer as in love with the whole camp sort of dialogue that they were getting in films from the 80s. We were more kind of into this more realistic style of communication, and so audiences just simply weren't buying the same sort of dialogue and conversations from between characters in this fourth film that they only 20 so years before were perfectly happy with from the same franchise. And so I'm not to say that the dialogue is on the same caliber of the first three films, but it is along the same lines. It's just not as well received because we were in a different time now where films were just made a different way. The third reason why this film is hated is mainly to do with the alien storyline. So this film all revolves around a story about an alien mummy that they discover at the beginning that's supposed to lead them to the lost city of Akator, or the mythical city of Akator, which obviously gets revealed at the end. People had problems with this, I think, because it did seem far-fetched compared to the previous three entries, which were more, Earth-based, obviously, with mainly just fighting Nazis in two of them, but then Temple of Doom, obviously, to do with that kind of underground cult-type group with magic. But so, yes, I guess audiences did feel that Aliens was a step too far, and then, yeah, it's just, people just didn't buy into it. And the fourth main reason why this film is hated is to do with the overuse of CGI. So upon rewatching this recently, yes, it is noticeable that it has a lot more CGI. Well, the first three had no CGI, and this one has a ton of it. And whilst the CGI isn't bad, it's just the fact that it is overused. And I do agree it was overused in this film almost unnecessarily. They could have used practical effects in certain scenes where it was clear, but they just chose to go with CGI. I think because George Lucas was on this whole CGI trip at the time, particularly as this was just after the Star Wars prequel trilogy where he was completely obsessed with it. So I think it's just a bit of George's hubris coming into play here, where he just wanted to make and show off all of his capabilities with the CGI. And yes, while Spielberg was a director, obviously George creates the story, it's his baby, and so they were working on it together, and I think they were really just trying to move the needle, I guess, with CGI, and I think it just didn't pay off, or it was rather the wrong film and franchise to do it with. Those are the main reasons as to why this film is hated, but now I'm going to delve into the things that I love about this film and what I think a lot of people can actually respect about this film if they didn't acknowledge it before. So the first reason as to why I think it's not that bad is the first hour of the film. So upon rewatching this the other day, I was shocked as to how much I loved the first hour of this film. Between the two action scenes with the warehouse and the motorbike chase through the college and whatnot, but even outside of them, the story introduction, the build up of the story and introducing all these plot elements, and the exposition by Indy when talking to Mutt and different characters at different times, I think was great, and it just felt like classic Indy. I found myself constantly asking myself during this first hour, I was like, what are people hating about this? This is great. I love this. The setup here is amazing. And whilst I know what's to come, having seen it before, I'm just thinking, wow, this first hour, I can't believe how great it is. To me, it was near perfect, and I was giving it a 9 out of 10 as a film at that point. The second thing that I love about this film is the sequence around about the middle of the film, which takes place in a grave. It's not a scene, it's a sequence because it goes for a fair amount of time. This was a fantastic scene in my eyes, with just in isolation at least. If you look at this whole sequence, it's classic Indiana Jones. It's them exploring this underground, mysterious place with dead bodies and skulls and spider webs and all these things, and uncovering artifacts and whatnot. And it's where they discover the crystal skull, and it's classic Indy because you've got these lurking enemies around nearby, these kind of tribe people, and there's a bit of action with them and fighting, and it introduces the element of horror and fear as well, whilst you have this adventure and intrigue themes as well. And that to me is where Indiana Jones is at its best. It's where it's balancing those themes of adventure and intrigue and mystery with also horror and almost thriller type elements involved with that. It's just, and these mythical scary themes that go along with it. It's great stuff when those things are happening in unison. And I think that was a perfect scene that illustrated that both sides of the film. The third thing I like about this film is that it has a full circle love story with Marion and Indy. So whilst I didn't particularly like Marion in this film, I thought she was probably the worst part in terms of her dialogue, and she was just annoying at times. Not that I found her that great in Raiders of the Lost Ark either, but she was better there than she was here. But that said, I felt it was a nice little bow-tied ending there to have them like fall in love again, getting married at the very end with that almost slight reference to the hat being handed over to Shia LaBeouf only for Indy to take it back off him. I thought that was great stuff there. And whilst The Last Crusade, the previous film, had a perfect ending where he's literally riding off into the sunset, this, to me, it doesn't take away from that ending at all, because it's just another type of happy ending compared to that one where he was alone in that one with his friends and his dad, but he wasn't, for one, that mission, but it was not a love story type ending, whereas this one is like a love story type ending, and that was nice, even if it's not completely earned through the events of the second half of the film, which is the worse half of the film. At least it's nice to see that side of Indy completed as he rides off into the sunset once again. And another thing that I want to mention that I love about this film is that whilst you can say what you want about the story, say what you want about certain moments or certain choices or even certain dialogue, but the production quality of this film is outstanding, and that's it's not a surprise when it's coming from Steven Spielberg. You know, all of the sets look fantastic, the camera work is amazing, and even one detail that I noticed when watching it again was that he uses this graininess. I know he shoots on film, but there is a graininess that they apply to the screen where it does make it feel like an older film, and I think that was intentional to kind of give it that similar aesthetic to the previous Indy films. They didn't want it looking too new and too different, so they added this graininess, it looks like, to the picture, and it just makes it feel like it's still back in that time. It's not that far off, and those little choices to me were great. And you know, talking about the direction there, but even the acting, I would say, from Harrison Ford, you know, as Indiana Jones, was just as good as ever. It's like he hadn't missed a beat in 20 years. And I even didn't mind Shia LaBeouf's character much, whilst it's got some little annoying scenes. I actually enjoyed him as a sidekick for the most part. He added a different flavor to Indy, especially now with Indy being an older guy. He kind of got to play off that a little bit, the young and the old. So to really summarize my thoughts here, I'd say the first half of this film is a near perfect. It's 9 out of 10. It's great stuff. But then the second half is where things fall off a bit, and it to me becomes an average 5 out of 10 type film. But when you average those out, you're looking at a 7 out of 10 film, which is pretty solid and above average in my eyes. And that's what I think of it. Look, it's not as good as the other Indiana Jones films, but it's still a good indie film in my eyes, and it deserves its place within the franchise. I think it's unfairly treated. And the reason it's unfairly treated is simply because there's a few really cringe scenes, and people have just taken those and run with them and used them to justify it as the whole film being bad, which is just simply not the case. There is such a thing as nuance, and the nuance is, yes, there are some bad scenes, but they're within an overall good film. And there's a lot more good in this film than bad, and that's why I place it as a 7 out of 10. And yeah, look, and I think more than anything, it's just become popular to hate on this film. It's almost like the cool thing to say in conversation. What did you think of the Indiana Jones series? Oh, I love the first three, but the fourth one is trash, and so I only consider there being three films. That's rubbish in my eyes. I think you're just parroting what other people say without really considering what's in this film and what makes up its great parts, because there are great parts in this film. There are good parts and there are bad parts. And so, yeah, look, I think nuance is the word. It's a above average film, but it's not a great film overall. It's just, I think it's a good indie film. So anyways, that's my thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of Crystal Skull. I'd love to hear what you guys think about it in the comment section below. Do you have the same feelings, or do you hate it? And I'd love to hear why you hate it or why you love it. I'd love to hear them all in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you next time. Bye.